The Hindu celebration of Ramanaumi is coming up at the beginning of April. So today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we talk about what it's like to be Hindu in Austin, Texas. Stay with us for our show.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you've joined us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host, and because there's a Hindu celebration, the celebration of Ramanaumi, coming up at the beginning of April, we thought we'd talk today about what it's like to be Hindu in a city where you might not expect to find Hindu people. And so with me today are three members of Barsana Dham Hindu Temple. Glad to have you. Prabhakari Devi, Anuradha Joshi, and Mohan Joshi. My apologies ahead of time for mispronouncing your names and anything else. But how many, let's start off by simply asking, how many Hindu people are there in the Austin area?
Roughly there's about 5,000 Hindus in Austin, and it's growing a lot lately with all of the high-tech development in Austin.
I'm glad to hear that. Now the temple is 6 years old so far, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what was your experience like? Because you two have been Hindu all your lives. Mm-hmm. What was your experience like here in Austin before the temple was founded, before it was established?
Well, we actually came to Austin after the temple was founded. But we did come from other cities which did not have the same sort of a Hindu presence in the form of this kind of a temple. So we were, for example, in Canada for a while and in California. And a lot of those cities do have Hindu temples. But what we have in Austin is something a little bit different and quite unique, actually.
So what has your experience been then, being in a place that has, as I understand, one of the largest Hindu temples in North America?
Mm-hmm. I really love this place because there is, as you said, largest Hindu temple. That's the main attraction, which makes this place so unique and good for us. Due to Barsana Dham, I can give my children, I can show them what Hinduism is, how we are supposed to celebrate all the festivals and everything. And I'm really glad, not only that, Barsana Dham gives even much more for being Hindus, like all the other things also, how their day-to-day behavior and all the values. So I'm really happy and very glad that I am here in Austin.
So the community of Barsana Dham then is not just the community of the faithful, but it's really a community of the culture of being Hindu. Would that be an accurate thing to say?
I think that's very true. When you go to Barsana Dham, you don't really feel that you are not in India. It feels very much the ambience, the people, the color, the festivals. Makes you feel like you're right at home. It's like a microcosm of India when you're in Barsana Dham. And earlier I alluded to the fact that it was a temple and there are temples elsewhere as well. But Barsana Dham temple is sort of a dynamic 24 hours a day place. It's what we call an ashram as well, where there's spiritual activity going on around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it's been created specifically to be sort of a spiritually significant place, in that it represents also a very holy place in India called Braj. And Barsana Dham was created to be, spiritually at least, a part of Braj. And so that makes it especially significant to us Hindus, but not only those of us who are in Austin, but other Hindus, wherever they may be, whether they are in Canada or New Zealand for that matter, or California or New York or wherever else.
We are more fortunate than I thought to have such an establishment here in Austin. But one other thing which perhaps some of us wouldn't realize is that you, Prabhakari, are not simply a member of the temple, but you're actually what we would call a monk, correct? Yes. Would you say a little bit about your role then in the temple?
Those who dedicate their full life to realizing God are called sannyas in Sanskrit. And In Hindu tradition, the sannyasi, or the person who's dedicated their life for God, is a role model for the rest of the community. So that they don't necessarily teach, but in my case I do teach. I teach about Hinduism within the temple and outside of the temple. I've lectured all over Austin, at UT, ACC, many churches, and all different kinds of groups, JCs, Kiwanis, Rotary, teach about Hinduism in Austin. And it's been a lovely experience, actually. I've had so many interesting encounters. Once I was speaking at the Westlake Country Club to a Rotary group, and I was giving an introduction to Hinduism when we were building the temple, and Austin didn't really know what Hinduism was, that there was a Hindu community in Austin, but it was becoming more and more noticeable. The temple went above the tree line outside of town. So I was speaking to this Rotary Club to introduce the temple to the community, and I gave some basic tenets of Hinduism, and afterwards a man came up to me and he hit me on the back and he said, "I did not know how Hindu my beliefs were."
Surprised you.
No, it didn't. It was very telling of my experience in Austin, and also about Hinduism, which is very universal in its teachings. So it's true, when people see me in town, they don't necessarily recognize by my dress that I'm a Hindu nun, which a Hindu would recognize. But I've had a lot of interaction with the community, and many people are learning about Hinduism through what the temple is doing in our education endeavors.
So what would you say your experience of being a Hindu in Austin has been?
Lovely experience. I travel around the country and I teach in different Hindu communities as well as American communities. And Austin is a perfect place to be a minority religion. I've been very involved in Austin area interreligious ministries, and I think that does a lot to bring the faith communities together. And now I'm serving on the board and I'm very happy to do that because I think it's such a good organization. But Austin is very open to learning new things, and the Statesman called me a few weeks ago and said, "We heard you're having a celebration, I'd like to come out and cover it." So they did, and it was in the paper, and it was just another example of how Austin is interested in learning and accepting a new member of the community. We find that, I think. We all find that.
That says a lot about us in Austin, which
Yes.
I'm glad to hear. And I wonder, as this celebration, Ramanavami is coming up, if you could say, I'll pick on you this time, Anuradha. If you could say a little bit about how you experienced the celebration here in Austin versus what the celebration was like for you as you were growing up.
Oh, it's very different actually, because Ramanavami is something which is different at different places. In India, actually, in small towns, it's different. And where I grew up, I can tell you about that. That when I was a little girl, there was a temple close to my house. And in my town, for all these 9 days, there was continuously 24 hours that Ramayana part was going on, chanting was going on. And even the little children, or whatever the age is, all the kids, they were encouraged to participate in it. And they were all asked if you can write God's name. How many times, anybody who will write more times, he will win some prize. And everybody was fully participating in that. And all the kids were in one corner of the temple were doing that, writing, and older kids were telling the younger kids this way, like they were growing also, they were chanting the name of the God at the same time. And we were having fun all day. We have nothing to do. Everybody was looking forward to go and chant and write as many names as we could.
And how often did you win the prize?
They used to give, actually, to encourage kids. They used to give almost to everybody. They had the different age groups. So the people who were doing really more, they were winning more books. And the people who were doing less, according to the age. So more or less, everybody was getting pretty much encouraged.
How will you celebrate here? Now that you're in Austin, what will your celebration be like?
Over here, it's not like 9 days, but I'm glad that we celebrate it here too. In Barsanadam, we go, we chant Lord Ram's name. Even we chant Ramayana, the same part we used to do there. It's the same thing we do over here also. And everybody participates in that. We do Aarti and then the Prasad, which is really good.
And the children also, will
Oh,
they
yes.
be writing God's name?
They don't write that, but I guess we can introduce that over here.
I think anything that gets children involved in their faith early on is really a good idea. Now, I am curious. You are outnumbered here. I'm curious about the role of men in Hinduism. In many faiths, there are more women that participate than men, probably because they want to involve their families, their children in particular. Is that, in your experience, the same in Hinduism? Or are both men and women pretty equally represented?
I think men and women and children are equally represented, pretty well represented, all of them. There certainly is a very active participation by women in the faith, and they certainly have a very key role to play in the faith, a very important role. And it's a leadership role as well as it's a supporting, nurturing role. And men participate in that equally as well. And we find the same thing in Austin. I think we all participate pretty much. We participate as families and as individuals. And we all enjoy doing that. And like Anuradha was saying, at Prasanna Dham, we always have besides the chanting and sometimes we have plays and cultural programs, we also have the meals. We sit down as a community, have wonderful dinners and lunches together, which are all faith-based, if that's an appropriate term to use.
Surely every faith group eats together quite a bit.
Yes.
That seems to be one important thing
Food
for
is
all
important.
of us.
Yeah.
And so at Prasanna Dham, men as well as women would share key leadership roles in celebrations, in worship, in whatever.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
And what has your experience been of leadership then in the temple? You talk about your teaching in other places. What's your leadership actually within the temple itself?
Well, our temple is founded by Swami Prakashananda Saraswati, who is a highly respected spiritual leader from India. And based on his teachings, Prasanna Dham was developed and Prasanna Dham runs. So I'm his student and I teach according to what he has taught me. And I am vice president of the International Society of Divine Love. But everything that the temple is about and everything that Prasanna Dham is about is a reflection of those teachings that Swamiji represents and has brought to the West.
Our show is just too short to go into too much. We'll come back though for the second half of the conversation in just a minute. Thank you for being with us on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll be right back. We're glad you're here for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue, where we're talking about being Hindu in Austin with three guests from the Hindu temple just outside town, Prasanna Dham. We have Prabhakari Devi, Anuradha Joshi, and Mohan Joshi. It's good to have all three of you, and it's a good education for me. We talked a little bit about celebrations and sort of being Hindu in the first half, but we haven't really talked about what worship is like, what the regular ongoing worship life of the temple is. Perhaps you can say a little something about that.
Sure. The Ram Navami celebration is similar to all Hindu festivals in that the purpose is to remember God. and to remember God in a special way, but to remind us in a unique way of the purpose of our life, which is to reach Him and to love Him and experience His grace and love in our lives. So on Ram Navami, we will read from a very sacred book to Hindus, which is called Ramayana, that talks about mainly the personality of God and also how the souls can reach God through love and devotion. So in India, it's very common for 9 days, day and night, to read this book and to learn those teachings and hear the stories again of God. At the temple, we'll do it in 1 day. We won't do the entire scripture of the Ramayana, but we'll read key verses and give the important message of devotion and love for God to everyone who's there. We do that every week, and we do that, in fact, every day at the temple, because every day is a sacred part of our life. And we feel that whatever time God has given us in our life, it's to reach Him and know Him, so we worship every day. Sundays, we gather as a community and have a service that begins with prayers and chanting God's name or singing God's name, and a lecture about how to practice Hinduism today, because that which was written 5,000 years ago actually applies perfectly to today. And I love to teach that to children, especially because sometimes they think far away from India, far away from my culture, and here, what is it that you have to tell me that's going to relate to something that I'm doing today? And when you do, they're very impressed. And so there's teaching and then some devotional ceremonies. So that's every Sunday at the temple. And those services are open to the public. In fact, Hindus believe that Hinduism is for the whole world. Whoever wants to take part in it is welcome. There's no restrictions on that.
So that would be a method then in introducing folks to the faith and saying, if you would like to join us, come on in.
The doors are always open. And actually, a lot of Barsanadam, guests to Barsanadam, although people come from all over the country to visit Barsanadam, it's a place, and it's become a place of pilgrimage for Hindus in this country. But people just drive by and are drawn in. It happens every day, many times. They say, I saw this place and I wanted to come in. So they're always welcome. Although we do have visiting hours in the morning and the evening every day, officially, but people continue to come and they're continually to be welcomed.
I'm glad to hear of a ministry that's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just about. Now, in worship then, would your role be different from the role of our nun here?
It would not be different in the sense in the format of worship and in the chanting that we do and in the way we participate and all that stuff. There would of course be a different role in terms of leadership, and that Bhakti Didi would lead such a congregation, for example, and we would be participants. And that would be the difference. So I mean, Didi, for example, does give very insightful and spiritually beautiful lectures, which we all enjoy very much listening to. And so she certainly has that role to play. The formalities of worship are essentially the same.
That's an interesting thing too, is that it's the same for a child, it's the same for the oldest member of the community, because it's a very simple and pure teaching, which is love God. The way a child loves God is right. The way that an adult loves God is right. As long as you're loving God, then you're doing the right thing. I heard Swamiji answer a question like that once. There's so many ways of worship, what's right and what's wrong. So Swamiji said, all of them are right and all of them are wrong. They're wrong if you're not feeling closer to God by doing it, and they're right if you are feeling closer to God through doing it.
Now, many faiths, I'm sorry. Many faiths would say that to approach God, to be closer to God, one needs to serve other people. That one's faith is not simply an interior movement, but it's also exterior. Would that also be a true statement for Hinduism in your experiences?
They're really defined in two different ways, serving humanity and serving God. Serving humanity, or doing your duty in society, is called dharma, duty, and that everyone is expected to do. And it's not that you gain a reward for that, but you are punished if you don't do it. If you follow all the rules and the laws that we have in our country, no one comes to your door and gives you a prize. But if you break any of those rules, then people knock on your door and tell you that you've made a mistake. So it's expected in Hinduism that certain that society runs in a smooth way and that everyone plays a part and has to take a part. But that's different than serving God. Serving God is the higher dharma, or the highest duty. It's the duty of the soul. So serving community and serving people is the dharma. It's the duty of all. But serving God is higher than that and different than that and beyond that. And you serve God through your love to God and by serving the temples and those teachers, saints who are teaching others to find God. So there are two levels of service, and service for God is considered the highest.
So in other words, to be a good citizen, to be a good father, to help people who need help, to be responsible for nature and for other living beings, if I do all of that, I just get a C grade. I need to really serve God to move up.
And serving God then comes by reading God's Word, participating in worship, or how?
By both those things, and by more, as Didi mentioned, by serving the religious institutions, by progressing the work, by serving people who need help in a spiritual sort of way, by serving saints and religious teachers, and by worship and all that devotion, by loving God.
And 5,000 Hindus here in the Austin area can make a difference. What would you hope as you work on living your life as a faithful Hindu person here in the Central Texas area? What would you hope happens from your example?
Happens. I'm not clear in which sense.
Would you want more people to say, I want to join Hinduism? Would you want your friends and family to know you as a holy person? How would you want your example to make a difference here in the Central Texas
I would
area?
like as many as people can join this, because I think Hinduism is really, it's wonderful, and Didi just said that our soul's first duty is, first purpose of life is to serve God and realize Him. So I would like if many people can join it, if many people can do this work, because that's the purpose of every soul. And if anybody sees me, my friends, more they will join this, more they will chant the names of God. Naturally, they will automatically will become better human beings, because when you are close to God, you find everybody is the same. Just love. There is nothing but love, and where the love is, everything goes right there, and everybody feels happy and good. So I think everybody should do.
That would be a wonderful example to all of us, yes. Now, your experience has been in several temples throughout your life, I assume. In what way is this temple right here in Texas any different?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that it's not just a temple, but it's an ashram. In other words, you have people who have dedicated their lives to spirituality, who live there all the time and practice spirituality. And they help other people like us, lay people who are very interested in the spiritual life, to also progress in that. So it's not that you just go to the temple and do your worship and you come out of it. It's to institutionalize it in your life and to practice it, and to make it such that it becomes a daily, hour by hour, minute part of your life. It affects every facet of your character and your being. And so that slowly your life turns around more and more in the direction of God. And so the level of intensity that Prasanna Dham brings to that effort is far more significant that you would find in another temple. And Prasanna Dham is also led by Sri Swamiji, and he's the spiritual founder and the guide of this Prasanna Dham community. And he's a very highly respected in India and everywhere else. And to find a person at that level to guide us in Austin is something of extraordinary good fortune from our perspective.
I was wondering if, this is a trite example, but here we are in Central Texas, and so I don't suppose that members of the temple, as they leave, put on their cowboy boots or get into their trucks or anything like that. I'm just imagining, because we're in this part of the country, is there any difference?
Well, there are plenty of people who come to take off their boots before they come in. Maybe none of us wear them, but it's really a mix. those who come to the temple. It's really across the spectrum. There are those who are born in India, those who are Indian heritage born here, people from all the rest of the world as well. Barsanadham really draws a full spectrum of the community, not just of Indian origin. But I wanted to comment on what Manmohan was saying too about what's special about Barsanadham. And we believe that all souls desire God, whether they are conscious of it or not, but they're seeking for that perfect love and that perfect satisfaction every minute of their lives. But what makes Barsanadham special is that we have an example of someone who reached the goal. They have the presence of God, you feel it just being close to Him. And His only teaching, His only words, His only purpose, every minute of every day, of a very busy day of Swamiji's life, is to help us reach that spiritual perfection that He's reached. So when people see Barsanadham and are amazed by its exterior beauty, then I always say that's nothing compared to the internal beauty that our spiritual teacher is awakening in our lives.
And that would be a common characteristic of a Hindu temple then, that there is one key religious leader giving it life and direction?
Not necessarily, no. Lots of times temples are just opened by a community of Hindus that come together and say we need to have a temple. And that temple would be very different in character than ours, because ours is based on a particular lineage and a tradition that goes back thousands of years. And that's why it's got the name Barsana, which is actually the name of a holy place in India. It's the same tradition in that holy place that Swamiji has brought here. So it's unique in everywhere. There's no temple like Barsanadham in India either.
In other words, the uniqueness comes because of the presence of a God-realized saint. And obviously God-realized saint exceedingly rare. So to have one in Austin, in Barsana, in this temple is something extraordinary.
And I think some folks would be interested then, if they have not come by, to come by now and visit and begin to get a sense of life there. So tell us the address.
Well, it's 400 Barsana Road, but that won't help you very much. It's on FM 1826, going towards Wimberley. And lots of people come by on their way to Wimberley, and anyone would be more than welcome. And we're in the phone book, Barsanadham.
Good. All right. Well, we'll look forward to sending some people your way, and to, I hope, some further conversation at some point on Austin Faith Dialogue. Half an hour doesn't do anything justice. But a good celebration to you then at the beginning of April.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. And thank you, folks, for being here on Austin Faith Dialogue this week. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you.